It's time to crunch the final numbers for the housing market 2022 and probably time to take down my New Year's Eve decorations. We are going to run through the pending, closed, and new listing numbers for Southern California and what it means going into 2023 for each of those counties. We're going to tally up the total closed sales for the year, compare it to years past, and we're going to show you another interesting trend when you take out the record highs of 2021 and the record lows of 2022. Hey there, Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates. We have been helping buyers and sellers make the best data-driven decisions in Southern California, and we're here with the last update for 2022 data for single-family homes. So if you're ready to dive into the numbers for Orange County, LA, Riverside, San Diego, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties, hit that like button and let's get started. Let's dive into the data. We're going to look at the sold. We're going to look at the properties under contract or in escrow. And we're going to look at new listings for the entire month of December. And we're going to compare all the way back to 2018 so we can see the trend for the 6 counties. Let's get cracking here. And first thing you'll notice is that we see that big surge of the number of properties that closed in 2020. No surprise. That is when things got crazy in the market. But what's interesting is to see the difference between 2021, when it was still a hot market, versus 2020. We see, you could say, a drop. 2019 and 2021 in closed sales in Orange County were very similar numbers. But let's look at another trend that's actually going to take us into the new year. This is one you need to look carefully for each of the counties, and that is the comparison between new listings and the properties under contract. Now, in 2018, you can see that the new listings exceeded the number of properties that went under contract. That is more typical throughout the year. Typically, you get more homes coming to the market than the homes that go under contract. But the holidays are different. Holidays, people have other excuses not to sell their home, and they're still out there, buyers shopping. And we often tell this to our clients. Look, serious buyers are out there buying. And how do you know? Well, you see the number of contracts that are written, the number of properties that goes under contract. Now, what's important to look at too, as I've talked about in many updates in the past, is the gap between the number of new listings and pending sales. As that gap tightens, and in some cases even flips, like we see in 2019 through 2020, where more properties are going under contract versus coming to the market, this shows you that inventory is being sucked up. So that's why it's important to look at what's happening to inventory on the new listing level. And we give you Altus research reports where we show you what's happening to the total listing level. And you watch our other market updates for that. So looking in Orange County in 2019 through 2022, we can see that more properties went under contract than new listings came to the market. And that is the same trend that we're seeing in 2022. And the gap is pretty similar between the number of new listings and number of properties under contract. So despite the numbers being at record lows for properties sold under contract and new listings, the trend lines continues. So in Orange County, with numbers down, it still was a similar market if you were out there shopping or if you were selling. So let's compare to other counties. LA, we can see this similar trend. Look at the big numbers of closed in 2020 like we saw. 2021 was strong as well. Big drop, huge drop, about half the sales closed in 2022 that we had in 2020. Make sure you stick around to the end to see the total numbers, total closed sales for the year. And same thing that we saw in Orange County where things were flipped for 2019 through 2022, record lows. Similar gap between those numbers that we had in 2020 and 2019. So interesting to see things down, but if you were out selling or shopping, it would have felt like a similar market to markets past. In Riverside, here's where you can see a big change in the number of new listings versus pending sales. 2018, we had more listings come than we had sales. 2019, those numbers got close together. Crazy years, 2020, 2021. But you can see 2022, we still have more new listings coming to the market versus pending sales, but it's a tiny gap. It's only 10 homes. And this gap is very similar to 2019. So this market is one where we're starting to see a shift. Inventory in the next few months will tick up, as it always does as we get into the new year. But we can see here where we may start to see a surplus of inventory. So have to watch Riverside closely based on what we're seeing here in the final numbers for December. San Bernardino, again, another market that looks a lot like Orange County in the years past in LA, where we've got a change in 2019 between the new listings and pending sales through 2021. But like Riverside, these are close numbers and new listings and pending sales. Another market where we're going to have to watch going into 2023. If the number of properties under contract stays down, we're going to find that the inventory starts going to tick up, and that is where we get into the price reductions, big price reductions. In Ventura, the fewest number of properties compared to the other counties in Southern California, and just fewer sales because of that. We can see that the trend between the new listings and pending sales, it has always stayed from 2018 to 2020, stayed flipped, where we have more properties going under contract than new listings. That's what you would expect going into the new year when you looked back on December of every year. But what's interesting is we see those numbers getting closer in 2022 like we did in 2018. So another market we need to watch. San Diego, look at the sheer number of properties that sold in 2020 in December. It was a good month for sales and less than half for the number of sales in this December. And another market, it actually took a little longer for the new listings and pending sales to flip. We didn't have it yet in 2019. Happened in 2020, and same thing in 2021. So this is a larger gap between new listings and pending sales. So this is where a market where actually it became more of a seller's market in December than it was in years past. So again, if you're out shopping and you're looking to buy, you're going to see that it was tighter and tougher to buy in San Diego. And this is countywide. Imagine what happens as you start to dive in. And that's why everybody says real estate's local. We see the variation you can have across Southern California. And when you dive down deeper and you dive into price range and you dive into neighborhood, things look even more different. So that's important for you to be tracking your local number. And we give you the tools to be able to track local numbers. And don't forget, we're real estate agents based in Southern California. We can help you here and beyond. Make sure you reach out to discuss your New Year's real estate resolutions. And here's where the rubber meets the road, as they say. This is a wrap up on Southern California sales. Not going to find this anywhere else. Single family homes that sold in these respective years, the entire year, going all the way back to 2018, according to the California Regional MLS. And there's a lot of numbers here. You need to be an email newsletter subscriber so you can get these charts exclusively and dive in and look. What is the trend in general that you see? Obviously, we see 2021 a big increase in the number of sales for all of the respective counties, and then we see into 2022 a drop in the number of sales, and there's again no surprises there. What's interesting to see is some variation. So 2020 was a big year for most counties, and there was an increase in sales for 5 of these 6. LA was down. It had bigger years before. The other counties, there's an interesting trend. San Bernardino, 2018 was a big year, dropped 2019, 2020 up. It wasn't until 2021 that we exceeded the numbers in San Bernardino. So again, be an email newsletter subscriber. You could take a closer look at this data. But let's do some fun things with these numbers if you like numbers the way I do. And that is, let's go ahead and take a look. Let's add them together to see what we get for Southern California. A lot of insight here, even though there's just a few numbers. Look how amazingly consistent Southern California was in 2018 and 2019. You can see that sales were within about 200 of each other for the entire year when you add up the 6 counties. 2020, while a big year, was still in total not much more, about 4,000 more than we had in 2018, 2019. It's 2021 where we get the big increase in closed sales, and it's 2022 where we see a huge drop in the number of closed sales. So let's go ahead and do some math to figure out the percentages. Well, year over year, which is going to sound like a big drop in sales because, well, number one, it was, but number two, we had a record year last year for high, and we have a record low. So when you compare records, peaks and troughs, you get big numbers. So there is a 26% year over year in the number of closed sales in Southern California. So that's a huge drop in the number of closed sales. Now, if you look at a more of an average, so you look at 2018, 2019, 2020, and you use about 195,000 for the number of closed sales, you compare that to 2022, you take out that extreme record, you're still off by about 14% in the number of total sales in Southern California. So any way you slice it or dice it, this was a very low year for sales. Here, for those who like data, you may find this interesting. Some folks were saying, and there's some truth to it, that when we had these extreme numbers of sales in 2021, we were stealing from future sales. That's one way to look at it. What if you go ahead and you average out 2021 and 2022? Take those two numbers, put them together and divide by 2. When you average it out, the red line here shows you that the average would have been about 196,856 for 2021 and 2022. Look at how relatively consistent that line is. Again, an interesting thought experiment. Had we not had the huge run up and had we not had this huge drop and we just continued trucking along like normal years in Southern California, this is what the sales trend would have looked like. Where do you think the housing market 2023 is headed for Southern California? Let us know in the comments below. Want to take a closer look at the numbers from this video? Make sure you subscribe to our free weekly email newsletter. There's a link below so you can do that. And if you're into real estate, you're not going to want to miss this next video. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we want to hear from you.